Good morning. Today we are continuing on with those percentages. Yesterday we were converting from the percent to a fraction, fraction to percent. Today we are doing CO30. I can convert percentages and decimals. So we're going to see how we go between a percentage and the decimal. So remember what we talked about yesterday. Percent literally means out of 100. Per is out of, cent is 100. It's out of 100. So that's our magic numbers, that 100. We're going to rewrite each percentage below as a fraction out of 100. And then we're going to write it as a decimal. So we know how to do that fraction, and then we're going to see how that works to turn that fraction into a decimal. So if we look at this 72%, we know it's 72 over 100. When we say this fraction, instead of saying 72 over 100, we call it 72 hundredths. So when you say a fraction correctly, it would be 72 hundredths because there's 100 on the bottom. So that's a hundredth. Think about how we have our places. We have the tens, we've got the ones, we've got our decimal. Then we have tenths. Then we have hundredths. So look at that place value. It's 1, 2 decimal places is the hundredth place. Isabel?
So in the one that they did for us, they wrote 7,200.
So,
do we have to do that?
Just be patient. So we call this, we say it out loud. That's why there's those quotation marks. We're going to say it out loud. It's 72 hundredths. So that means we have our decimal place, and we put that last number goes in that hundredths place, that second place. So the last number will always go in the hundredth place, and then we fill it in. Not acceptable. Take your hands apart and stop being silly with them. So if we look at 3%, what would the fraction be? Bennett.
3 out of 10.
What's our magic number is 100. So if we're using that percentage, it would be 3 hundredths. So that's what we're saying out loud. You can write it as a way to remember 3 hundredths. That's what we say when we say it out loud. 3 hundredths. So when we write it as our decimal, what is it going to look like, Luciana?
0.03.
0.03, because remember I said the last number of that numerator has to be in the hundredth place.
There's no 10.
So the tenth is going to be a 0 because there's no tens place up here. We put that as our 0. So we would say this is 3 hundredths. This is 3 hundredths. Nolan.
If it was 30, it could be written as 3 tenths.
Yes. So 90% would look like what? What fraction would 90% be? James?
90 out of 100.
90 out of 100, or we could say 90 hundredths. So what does 90 hundredths look like as a decimal, Matthew?
0.9.
So 90 hundredths, you weren't listening to what I said. This is not 90 hundredths. What is 90 hundredths?
0.09.
Nope, that would be 9 hundredths. 0.90. This is 90 hundredths. Now what Nolan had said was, hey, we could simplify it and we could call it the tenths. So we could simplify 90 hundredths. That is the same thing as saying 9 tenths because we divide a 10 out of each of them. So if we simplify it down to 9 tenths, what would our decimal look like, Matthew? 0.9. They are the same, they are equivalent. They are the same value, right? 90 hundredths and 9/10 are equivalent. So either one would work as an answer. Enzo.
Do you have to simplify them all?
Nope, you do not have to simplify. If you wrote 0.90, that would be an accurate answer. We don't have to simplify the fraction when we're going to the decimal, but if you want to, you can. So we have a couple of friends who are comfortable with that, and they're like, oh, 30% would just be 0.3. Matthew said, oh, 90% is 0.9. I'm okay if you simplify it. I'm okay if you leave it as 90 hundredths and you wrote 0.90. They are the same value. Luciana.
So you don't want us to have another equivalent fraction?
You don't have to do equivalent fractions for this. You just have to write it as the decimal. 0.9 and 0.90, they're the same value. I'll accept either way. Now let's look at 114%. What would that fraction look like? Enzo.
Wouldn't it be 0.11?
Fraction.
Oh. 114
114 hundredths. Now I have three numbers. Remember what rule I said at the beginning. Taya, what would my decimal look like?
Would do 1.14?
1.14. Why am I putting something in the ones place, Taya?
Because that's an extra 100.
Oh, that extra 100 means it's a whole one. So that extra 100 means it's a whole one. So it's 1 and 14. So remember I said that last digit of the percent has to go in the hundredths place. This is our hundredths place. We've got two decimal places. So if we are over 100%, we're bumping into the ones place. So it wouldn't be 0.114. That's a super tiny number. This is 114%. It's over 100%. So that means we have that whole one and then the 14 hundredths. Did you have a question as well? Okay. Next one, 150%. Riziki.
150 hundredths.
150 hundredths. What does that decimal look like? Amelia.
1.50.
1.50. Could I also say 1.5?
Yes.
Because I could have simplified it and divided that 100 out, so it would have been 15/10. These would be equivalent. Okay, so either one I would accept as an answer. Would I accept 0.15? No. 0.15 is a tiny number. Okay, we have over 100, so we need that one in the hundredths place. Any questions on this? All right, I'm going to scroll up. Do you see how you can go directly from a percentage to a decimal? Looking at the first one, both 72% and 72 hundredths mean 72 out of 100, which is the same as 0.72. A second example, 59% literally means 59 out of 100, or 59 hundredths, or 0.59, which we would say is 59 hundredths. If we say that decimal correctly with proper math, we don't say 0.59. That's not proper math. We would say it's 59 hundredths. So either way, our fraction of 59 over 100 or our decimal, they both are pronounced grammatically, mathematically correct. We would call them both 59 hundredths. So we say them both the same way. So third example, 110% literally means 110 out of 100, or 110 hundredths, or 0.10. So they're all pronounced mathematically correct as 110 hundredths. This one, we would also say 1 and 10 hundredths. Riziki.
Oh, never mind.
All right. So we're going to convert each percentage to a decimal. Do we have to put it as a fraction?
No.
No. You can if it helps you. And I'll show you which one it really might help us. But you're going to say what that percentage is in your head. 33% is 33 hundredths. What would that look like? What decimal would that look like, Bennett?
0.33.
Yeah, because we want that last digit of our percent to be in the hundredths place. What would 21% look like? Melina.
0.21.
What would 9% look like? Amelia.
0.09.
Nice. This is the one that the majority of people mess up on because they see that 9%, they put it as 0.9, and they forget that that digit needs to be in the hundredth place. So we always have to make sure when we're writing out those percentages, unless it's a zero, that digit has to be in the hundredth place. Riziki.
So if it was like 90 hundredths, could you say 0.9?
So if it's 90 hundredths, remember I said we could divide out that 10 and simplify it to 9 tenths, which is the same as 0.9. Okay, so if it has the zero after it, you can drop that zero off. But if that zero comes before, it is super important that we put it in there because there's a big difference between 9 hundredths and 9 tenths. Big difference. All right, you got 9% on a test versus 90%. Mom and dad would be really unhappy with one and super happy with the other. Big difference. Nolan.
So with 70%, you can just like write it as like 0.7 because the zero
Yes.
comes
Yes,
after.
exactly. All right, so now we need to be able to go the opposite direction. We need to convert our decimal to a percent. Ooh. Is this going to be challenging?
No.
Not as hard as what it might look like. So let's do the first one together. 22 hundredths would be what percent, Aiden?
22%.
22%. 3 tenths would be what percent? This is 3 tenths. What percent is that, Aiden? Say it louder. 30%. This is the tricky one. Just like I said up here, those are the tricky ones.
This is a tricky one.
If it is just in the tenths place, remember our percentages go out to the hundredths place. So you can fill in that zero. It is not 3%, it is 30%. Good job catching that, Aiden.
And there was another one, 1.3 on the far end.
So let's look at that one on the far end. 1.3 would be what percentage, Nora? 130%. Because remember, if it's only to the tenths place, you fill in that zero for the hundredths, so it turns it into 130%.
So you don't have to put zero at the end.
For the percentage, if you're going to the percentage, you have to put the zero.
For the decimal.
For the decimal, it doesn't need the zero at the end because it's equivalent. They had just simplified it down. But going from that decimal to the percentage, you have to put the zero because there's a big, big difference between 13% and 130%.
Yep.
Woo, we would all be just ecstatic if we had 130% as a grade.
That'd be nice.
Super, super sad if we had 13% as a grade. Big difference. So always, always make sure if there's nothing in that hundredths place, you fill it in with the zero when you're converting it to the percentage. Super important. All right, any other questions? Bennett.
Number 4, would that just be 5%?
Yes. So this has the 5 in the hundredths place, so that would be 5 hundredths. So it would be 5%. Fiziki?
Could you do
So for Zeke, what would that look like as a fraction? Right? So what would that look like as a percentage? Please stop moving and making noise. So if you're not sure how to put that decimal straight to the percent, you could put it as a fraction, and then it makes it a little bit clearer. So if you're not sure, you can convert it to the fraction and then go to the percentage, because we did that yesterday. There's nothing wrong with doing that, as long as we get the percentage at the end. Any other questions for today? Okay, if you are watching at home, we hope you are well, and we hope to see you soon. Have a wonderful day.